Hello YouTube, this is Neon. Today the title of my talk is going to be thoughts on suicide. What this talk is going to boil down to for everybody who listens to it: stop attacking, stop manipulating, stop trying to kick people when they're down, specifically people who are suicidal or people who have committed suicide. For those who have committed suicide, don't badmouth them. Let them rest in peace. They're dead, for God's sake. So, I was watching a coroner documentary, like a medical investigator to determine if a person's death was accidental or if it was murder or whatever. And tangentially, they said that there were 6,000 suicides every year in LA County. And to hear that figure was shocking to me. 6,000. It's as if that the county of LA is losing a small city of people every year to suicide. And it's heartbreaking. Those numbers are terrifying. And I just think of 6,000 beautiful people who are leaving us every year at their own hands. And I want them back, quite frankly. Really quickly, I am going to suggest, there is two sides of the story. I remember seeing a documentary on people who clean up the crime scene or the death scene after the person has died. And that's whether it was murder, suicide, natural causes, accidental death. And in one case, it happened to be a suicide. This young woman was suicidal. She made some decisions that devastated her life. She had to move in with her brother. Her brother had a gun in the house. He obviously didn't think that she was going to use it, and he didn't think that she was going to commit suicide, but she committed suicide with his gun. And some people blamed him. How could you leave a gun in the house? How could you, when your sister's suicidal? It was almost like they were trying to blame him for her suicide. So I think in that respect, and he was pissed. He was pissed at her because he took her into his home, he was taking care of her, and for her to have done that really did affect his life. So I will say that there is two sides to this. I don't want to portray the person who commits suicide as completely the victim, okay? But even in his case, I wouldn't demonize his sister. When a person's suicidal, they're not thinking straight, they want to end their life, and they may do it in a way that does affect other people. There's no doubt about that. However, what I found to be the case is that people oftentimes want to blame the victim, whether the person has committed suicide or the person is suicidal. And generally speaking, I am completely in disagreement. Whether they tell people, or people say, a person who's suicidal, they're selfish. They only think about themselves and their problems. They don't care about the effects that it has on other people. They're just trying to get attention. If they've attempted suicide more than once, they're just trying to get attention. They really don't mean it. That's how people verbally attack people for either committing suicide or being suicidal. And I think that's terrible. I think it's terrible that we look at other people who are suffering so much that they want to end their lives, or that they in fact end their lives, and all we can do is attack them and not let them rest in peace. Attack them, kick someone while they're down. When people make these statements, which I've heard people, when they're in their comfort zone, they will boldly make these kinds of inhumane statements. They're not going to ever say, oh yeah, that person's down and I'm going to kick them while they're down. Why? It would make them look terrible. None of us want to admit to being a terrible person. So they'll call it something else, but that's exactly what they're doing when they see someone who's suicidal, and then they want to diminish and demean and belittle that human being by saying that all of their suffering just boils down to their wanting to get attention, or they're feeling sorry for themselves, or they're selfish. I think it's terrible. Now, my personal experience, I had two friends that committed suicide. One was intentional, and one I still don't know if it was intentional or if it was accidental. He may have overdosed by mistake or not mistake on, I believe it was on meth or crack. He was addicted. He struggled with drug addiction, and it never occurred to me to blame him, and it doesn't today. The loss was devastating, devastating. We had lost contact by the time I found out that he was gone, and I had assumed it was intentional suicide. I was devastated. We had fights. We made up, we became friends, so that helped me deal with my pain because we left on good terms. But I found some comfort in that people who were closer to him when he died told me that nobody really knows if it was intentional or non-intentional, but that he did overdose on drugs. The other person did intentionally commit suicide, and I believe that for him, a lot of it's dealt with economic. He didn't have money, he couldn't take care of himself, couldn't function, couldn't pay his bills. I believe that. I may be wrong here, but had to do with why he committed suicide. It never occurred to me to think, oh, they're selfish, they don't care about other people, they're just thinking about their own problems. It never occurred to me to think like that, to attack them verbally and to reduce their pain and suffering to verbal attacks that malign them. It never occurred to me, and yet people talk like this all the time, and I think it's not right. It's factually incorrect, and it's immoral to talk about people like this who are suicidal, who have committed suicide. Now, many people who have actually committed suicide, they've tried to commit suicide numerous times, and then they succeed the third, fourth, fifth time. So that whole argument of they've attempted suicide numerous times and they're just playing games and they're crying wolf and they're trying to get attention, that's not really true. But again, people are not compassionate and caring to other people. They just want to attack other people while they're down. They don't call it attacking them while they're down. They don't have the courage to admit where their heart is and why they're making these kinds of false statements that are cruel and that are heartless. But that's exactly what they're doing nevertheless. I remember seeing a documentary on, I forget the name of this famous actor, but his daughter had attempted suicide numerous times, and one time the rope broke. She hung herself and the rope broke, but eventually she did commit suicide. People who have committed suicide, many times people have said that they're trying to get revenge on people and this kind of stuff. We shouldn't look at things that we don't understand and come up with harsh conclusions. Did you get in that person's mind and read their mind before they committed suicide so that you actually know they're somehow trying to get revenge on someone by killing themselves? Where do you come up with that? Where do you come up with that for people who make these kinds of statements? These statements are loaded in stereotypes that attack the victim. Okay? I remember calling someone who, when I was very depressed, and I wasn't actually like, hey, I'm about to commit suicide, so I'm calling you. But I was so depressed that she could actually tell, and she had asked me, and I told her, yeah, I was thinking about it. And she resorted to a lot of manipulations that people resort to when someone's suicidal. You're going to make me feel bad. You're going to make me cry. Think about all the people that, you know, might miss you. What if nobody's going to miss you? There's people who are abandoned by their families. But she resorted to all the typical manipulations, which is what I'm going to call them, so that she could change me. Nobody should be changing another person. people should try to help people who are suicidal, but using those kinds of manipulations like don't think about your problems. If you're suicidal, you should be thinking about the depression and working through it in a way that's not going to resort to suicide, but you should be thinking about your pain and resolving that pain that is so overwhelming. There's no doubt in my mind. And to tell people, don't think about your pain, it's like telling a person with cancer, don't think about your cancer. It's makes no sense. So I have in my notes, not advocating for self and others. I don't know what I meant by that. You know, there may be selfishness on both parts, but in terms of suicide and in terms of those who attack people who commit suicide, I don't think a person who commits suicide is selfish. That's my opinion. I attempted suicide once myself. I've been certainly suicidally depressed, and I don't think it's me being selfish or any person's being selfish who is suicidal. There may be situations where a person is, but that's the exception, not the rule. And I would tell people that it's not about you. When a person's suicidal, it's not about you. It's not about you. Don't make it about you. They're the ones suffering. It's not about you. It's not about you. So don't get all into the you're going to get me depressed. It's not about you. It's not about you. What can I do to get this person not to commit suicide? What can you do? Nothing. It's not about you. It's about that person. Now, what you can do, and what I would suggest that you do, is listen. Learn to listen. We listen with our ears, not with our mouths. So don't be giving advice to people who are suicidal. Listen. Listen. With all due respect, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth. Don't give advice. Don't give advice. Listen. Be compassionate. The only time you open your mouth is to let that person know that you're there and that you're listening. You're not judging them. You're not trying to give them advice. Obviously, if they're calling you, whether they tell you they're suicidal or you can just tell by the level of depression, as was the case with me, with this person I had called, if you can tell, hey, this person might be suicidal, they're calling you because they don't want to commit suicide. They want to vent and vent, which is another accusation people make against people who are suicidal. They're trying to vent and they're trying to dump their garbage on me. It's not about you. It's about that person. That person is in pain and that person needs someone to show compassion. Don't make it about you. Don't be selfish. Listen compassionately. Don't make accusations. Don't make stupid, cliched comments. Don't say, don't be selfish. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Don't make other people sad by killing yourself. Don't give advice. Listen, take the cotton out of your ears, stick it in your mouth. Only make any kind of a comment such as, okay, little bitty comments that let that person know you're listening, you're following them. Let them get it all out. They may need to talk for a while. Be patient and be willing to listen. Now, I do believe legally, if that person told you that, they're considering suicide, when they're done getting it all out, you probably have a legal responsibility to ask them, hey, are you still considering to commit suicide? And that person's probably going to tell you no if you listen compassionately. When they're through with everything that they have said, showing compassion and telling them, letting them know, yeah, you are suffering, yeah, you are going through hell right now. You should feel extremely depressed. That's normal when you're going through this kind of stuff, whether it's a breakup or financial ruin or major depression. It's okay to show compassion. Compassion isn't advice. Compassion is, you're suffering, I hear you're suffering. After listening, not interrupting and immediately trying to say, oh, I'm being compassionate right now. After listening, if that person wants to speak for a half an hour, we shut up and we listen for half an hour. Okay? And when they're done expressing their pain and suffering, then we can be passionate and say, I'm sorry that you're suffering so much, because you really are suffering. And just showing compassion and love. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment commercials, recommend my videos. Do one or more of those things. Thank you and best wishes.